Recording in progress.
Welcome, everybody. I'd like to call the meeting to order. It's 6 o'clock, May 7th. The Planning Commission meeting is now in session. Can we have a determination of quorum, please?
Rob Pierce.
Present.
Commissioner Nelson is absent. She will not be here tonight. Dan Lazareski. Present. Pat Phillips.
Here.
Michael Flick. Here. Francine Donchik.
Here.
And Linda Kennedy, who is on Zoom.
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Wonderful, thank you. Will you all please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May we please have the ethics law announcements?
Commissioners are reminded that if with respect to any matter or any person coming before the commission today, number one, you've received a gift or loan. Number two, you have a pecuniary interest. Number three, you have a commitment in a private capacity, such as a family, employment, business, or similar relationship. Or number four, if you've provided representation or counseling before an agency to a person or entity for compensation within the last year on a matter that's being considered here today, please remember to disclose that gift, loan, interest, commitment, or prior representation at the time the matter is being considered. And furthermore, please remember that you must abstain from deliberation or voting on the matter if it's clear that the gift, loan, interest, commitment, or prior representation would materially affect the independence of judgment of a reasonable person. Commissioners are also reminded that under the Planning Commission rules, if you've had any contact outside this meeting with any persons interested in a matter coming before the commission today, you should disclose the nature of that contact at this meeting. I'm also going to go ahead and read the Zoom instructions and the public comment instructions. This meeting is being held in the County Commission chambers, and it's also being held via Zoom. To attend this meeting via Zoom, you can log into the Zoom webinar using the link found on the first page of the agenda. You can also join the meeting by typing zoom.us into your computer browser, click Join a Meeting on the Zoom website, and enter meeting ID 842-7265-9406. Alternatively, you can join this meeting via telephone only by dialing 1-669-900-9128 and enter meeting ID 842-7265-9406 and press pound. For those wishing to provide public comment via Zoom, you can log into the Zoom webinar on the link on the agenda and utilize the raise hand feature during any public comment period. To provide public comment via telephone only, you can press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to mute or unmute. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have the appeal procedure, please, Mr. Lloyd?
Yeah, most decisions rendered by the Planning Commission are appealable to the Board of County Commissioners. If you disagree with the decision of the Planning Commission and qualify as an aggrieved person or party, you may appeal in writing within 10 calendar days from the date that the decision being appealed is reduced to writing, filed with the Secretary of the Planning Commission, and mailed to the original applicant in the proceeding being appealed in accordance with Washoe County Code. Please call the planning staff immediately at 328-3610 for information on the appeal procedure and the application fee.
Thank you. This time, I'd like to open up general public comment. Do we have any general public comment?
I do not have any persons for general public comment in chambers.
I have no hands raised in Zoom.
Okay. That brings us on to item 6, approval of today's agenda. We have a couple changes. Item 8A has been pulled from the agenda. And we'd like to move item B to the, or 9B, I'm sorry, to the end, make it the last one. So with that, can I get a motion to approve the?
Commissioner Donchik, motion to approve with the amendments.
Thank you.
Commissioner Lazareski, second.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say
Aye.
no. All right. That brings us to item number 7, approval of the March 5th draft minutes. Everybody get a chance to take a look at that. Do we have any changes, or can I get a motion?
Commissioner Donchik, motion to approve.
Commissioner Lazarewski, second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. All right, that moves us on to the first item, which is 8B. And that is the extension of time request for tentative subdivision map, case number TM 16-005. Mr. Lloyd, would you like to announce that?
Yes, I would. For hearing, discussion, and possible action to approve an extension of time for the approval of the subdivision for 2 years from June 28th, 2024 until June 28th, 2026. The subdivision was originally approved by the Planning Commission on July 5th, 2016. The Planning Commission granted approval the Planning Commission may grant an extension of not more than 2 years for the presentation of any final map after the 2-year period for presentation of a successive final map has expired in accordance with NRS 278-360. Again, this is TM 16005 for the extension of time for the ridges at Hunter Creek. Now, these are consent items, and the Planning Commission may ask for presentation, or it's up to the purview of the Planning Commission.
Right. Does anybody have anything they'd like to ask or anything? No? Okay, can I get a motion to approve? Oh, sorry, public comment. Do we have any public comment on this?
I do not have any public comment in chambers.
No public comment, no hands raised on Zoom.
Okay. Bring it back to the board for a motion.
Motion to approve consent items? Just item B. Or just item B?
Second by Linda Kennedy.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed, say nay. Okay, motion passes. Thank you. All right, that brings us to 8C, which is extension of time request for tentative subdivision map, case number WTM 20-006, and special use permit case number WSUP 20-0021.
Okay.
Mr. Lloyd?
And I believe it's WTM 20005. Just
Yeah,
make
oh,
one
I'm sorry.
correction. That's okay.
Yes, 5. Mine's got a little blur on there, sorry.
No worries. For hearing, discussion, and possible action to approve an extension of time for the approval of the subdivision and associated special use permit for 2 years from May 20th, 2024 until May 20th, 2026. The subdivision was originally approved by the Planning Commission on January 5, 2021. The Planning Commission may grant an extension of not more than 2 years for the presentation of any final map after the 2-year period for presentation, for 2-year period for presenting a successive final map has expired in accordance with NRS 278-361C.
Okay, do we have any public comment on this matter?
I have no public comment in chambers. I have no hands raised on Zoom.
Does any board member have any questions or anything? Can I get a motion?
Commissioner Donchik, I motion to approve.
Oh, I need a second.
Linda Kennedy at seconds.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Motion passes. Thank you. That brings us on to public hearing item 9A, Development Code Amendment Case Number WDCA 24-0002 for Affordable Housing Package 2. Mr. Lloyd, would you please announce that?
Yes, this is for hearing, discussion, and possible action to initiate an amendment and approve a resolution to amend Washoe County Code, Chapter 110, Development Code, by modifying various sections in Division 2, Area Plan Regulations, Division 4, Development Standards, and Division 9, General Provisions, in order to update regulations related to allowed residential uses in the Spanish Springs planning area, maximum height restrictions in the Sun Valley planning area, multifamily parking minimums, bike parking, turf requirements, common and private open space, and definitions. These updates include deleting a section limiting structures in the Sun Valley planning area to 2 stories in height and modifying various sections to remove Table C1, which modifies allowed residential uses in the Spanish Springs planning area, update minimum off-street parking space requirements for multifamily housing, update requirements for bicycle storage by removing requirements for bicycle parking spaces, by adding design standards for short and long-term bicycle storage, by adding design requirements for bicycle racks, and by removing Figure 110, 410, 15.2, which shows bicycle parking space dimensions, remove the requirement to provide turf areas in multifamily developments of a minimum of 50% of the required landscaping area, modify minimum size and dimension requirements for private open space in multifamily developments, add standards for turf areas provided as common open space for multifamily developments, and add definitions for short and long-term bicycle parking and all matters necessarily connected therewith and pertaining thereto. If the proposed amendments are initiated, the Planning Commission may recommend approval of the proposed ordinance as submitted, recommend approval with modifications based on input and discussion at the public hearing, or recommend denial. If approval is recommended, the Planning Commission is asked to authorize the chair to sign the resolution to that effect. Representing Washoe County in this matter is our planners, Chris Bronzik and Kat Oakley.
Chris, floor is yours.
Thank you. We are looking at WDCA 24-0002. This is known as Affordable Housing Package 2. So this package is about removing barriers for different types of housing based on things currently in the code, but also maintaining code requirements that provide important benefits to the community. Most of the changes seen today are going to be county-wide changes, and the two area plan proposed changes are simply to make both area plans consistent with the rest of the county. Additionally, as part of this package, we are making proactive changes for multimodal transportation to further facilitate future housing changes. And the amendments today cover 7 different topics. Making the Spanish Springs use table consistent with the rest of the county, multifamily parking minimums, bike parking standards, Sun Valley story limit removal, turf requirements, common and private open space requirements, and updating definitions. So a little bit of background. So in November of 2023, the BCC initiated or identified affordable housing components. And this is part of that initiation. So again, this package focuses on items that have historically been challenges for housing developers. Again, it spans 6 articles within the Washoe County Development Code. And it should be noted that many of the codes that are being amended today have not been updated since the 1990s. The changes that are proposed are not applicable in the Tahoe planning area. So the first proposal is with Article 216. This is the Spanish Springs area plan modifiers. And within the modifiers, there's Table C1, which modifies the allowed residential uses within the Spanish Springs area plan that is different from Article 302 within the Development Code. What this table does is it prohibits certain residential developments within neighborhood commercial. It also requires above and beyond the normal for county-wide requirements when it comes to ADUs. So under this table, a detached accessory dwelling or an ADU would be required to go to a special use permit before the Planning Commission. And so the proposal right now is to intentionally eliminate Table C1 entirely from Article 216, and instead, those within the Spanish Springs area plan would instead have to use Article 302, just like the rest of the county would. The next proposal we are looking at is the Sun Valley area plan. And so we are trying to put the Sun Valley modifiers in line with the rest of the county to support diverse types of housing and to further the policies of the master plan, as well as the specific policies of the Sun Valley planning area. Sun Valley is the only planning area within the county that has a story limit. And so I want to be clear that there's a difference between a story limit and height limit. And there's the underlying zoning within the Sun Valley planning area that has height limits tied to the zoning designations. The majority of Sun Valley would be subject to the underlying 35-foot height requirements of that underlying zoning. This proposal to remove the two-story limit makes no changes to the zoning, makes no changes to density, and does not increase multifamily allowances within Sun Valley. Instead, it's just bringing Sun Valley into being more consistent with the rest of the county. So the next proposal we're looking at is to Article 410, and is parking and loading. And so as part of this review, we looked at national and local jurisdictions and their parking requirements. And what we found is that the proposed minimums in Washoe County are high for the region, but really in the middle of the road for the national standards. So what we found is many of your larger cities nationally are doing away with parking minimums entirely. They're getting rid of all their requirements. And we also saw that Reno and Sparks both have a 1 parking space per unit, regardless of unit size or bedroom size. So 4-bedroom or 1-bedroom is going to have 1 parking space per unit. That's not what we are proposing under this package. So the parking standards for multifamily, again, has not been updated since 1993. The current spaces are 1.6 space per 1 bedroom, 2.1 space for 2 bedrooms or fewer, 2 bedrooms or fewer, and what's proposed is 1 space for 2 bedrooms or fewer, 2 spaces for 3 bedrooms, and 2.5 spaces for 4 or more. Additionally, we have a current requirement of 1 covered parking space for every unit. So if there's 200 units or 300 units, there's 300 garages or covered parking. In this case, we're looking at a reduction of 1 covered parking space for every 2 units, so 50% reduction. So what we found when we dug into the statistics of everything was that while parking on its own appears small, 150 square foot at the smallest, the cost of the parking, the cost of the construction, the operation, and the continued maintenance adds up. And it turns out it's a significant hidden cost within housing. And it's a cost that is oftentimes moved toward, put on the renter. And so what we found was that suburban off-street parking had an annualized cost of over $1,000, and urban service parking has an annualized cost of over $2,000 per a 2023 study by VTPI, which was a transportation policy organization. We also looked at existing trends with census data. So what we found is that current minimum parking is higher than what is currently necessary. We also found that household sizes have decreased, and that we also, in Washoe County, most rental households use 1 vehicle or less. As a result, there's less demand for parking within rental households. So as part of this, we also are looking at bicycle storage and bicycle rack standards. Currently, Washoe County does not have any defined bike standards, bike parking, or bike storage requirements. And so our goal is to proactively go for this and ensure that bicycle storage, bicycle parking is a primary consideration for developers moving forward. And so this code covers the type of bicycle racks that are that should be used, requirements for installation, secure location, covered areas, and additional requirements that are outlined by both short-term and long-term bicycle parking. And so it is important for Washoe County to continue supporting additional transportation efforts, especially with our affordable housing codes continuing forward. And the reason being is because this is intended to support residents who may not have a car, may not have access to vehicles, or just want an alternative to driving. So Article 412 is the next code that is being proposed to be amended. Right now, the turf requirements within 412, again, have not been updated since the early 1990s. And the current language within this code requires that multifamily developments have turf area equal to a minimum of the 50% of the total landscaped area. And that can add up. However, with northern Nevada climate, the requirements for permanent irrigation and the continued maintenance it's an unintended burden on these types of development. So we also found that the current language within our code is counter to the goals of Envision Washoe 2040. Removing this does not prevent future development from creating turf areas for their residents. And we'll discuss turf a little later in this, but part of this package is also further defining turf areas to make it an actual usable amenity for the residents instead of just an afterthought. So Article 432 is residential private open space and residential common open space. And these haven't been updated since 1996. Again, we reviewed various jurisdictions nationally to bring, in this case, the county's balcony and deck standards to be more consistent with regional and national standards. We are looking at a reduction in the minimum size of ground floor rear yards, ground floor patios, upper level decks, balconies, all which can lower the cost of construction of certain housing types. And so what we found was our current code requirements for this can have a potential significant increase on engineering costs for development. Additionally, the new proposal will provide options to forego decks entirely, patios, balconies, and instead require them to use that square footage within the common open space. And the common open space is pools, it's basketball courts, large lawn areas, et cetera. So something for the community as a whole. And so this, moving forward with 432, this is the area where we start to flesh out the turf area requirements. So we added standards for the turf area, the dimensions of the turf area, the square footage of the turf area, and the locations where they can be in proximity to roadways. Lastly, with the inclusion of bike parking, both long-term and short-term, we did need to define those. And so we have added 3 definitions within 902 to capture the bike parking requirements. There were 2 community meetings held, one on April 1st and one on April 3rd. The first meeting was attended by approximately 5 people, and the second by approximately 7 people. There were questions related to removal of the story limit in Sun Valley, density allowances changing, and changes to the balcony and patio sizes. It should be noted that in these meetings, community members did have serious concerns on the removal of the story limit. We have had subsequent conversations with commenters about their questions and concerns since those meetings. And planning staff did provide an update to the Sun Valley CAB on May 4th where approximately 30 people did attend. The required findings are consistency with the master plan, promote the purpose of the development code, response to changed conditions, and no adverse effects. And staff was able to make all required findings. Staff is recommending approval of the development code amendment. A recommended motion is before you, and we're available for any questions you may have.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to open up public comment on this, and it seems like there's going to be a lot of people here, so if somebody said something before you, please don't repeat what they're saying if possible.
In chambers, first I have Pat Dawson. Davison, please state your first and last name at the podium for the record.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Pierce, members of the commission. My name is Pat Davison. Thank you for this opportunity to comment on proposed changes to reduce existing regulatory barriers to affordable workforce and multifamily housing. These changes are designed to incentivize the construction of smaller units with access to adequate infrastructure. The baseline or minimums proposed here give those smaller unit developers more flexibility to keep costs down. If the requirements are a significant barrier, developers go elsewhere. And depending on the development costs and expected rents, a developer can add additional amenities or go beyond the minimums proposed here. Generally, I support staff recommendations. Did want to share with you a few thoughts about the Sun Valley height limit. I'd ask you to consider a compromise or middle ground. I respect the comments from the Sun Valley residents who do not want the two-story height limit removed. If you decide to keep the two-story height limit in place for all new residential, commercial, and industrial structures in Sun Valley, please consider some alternative that allows higher density 3 stories for multifamily use if affordable housing goals are met. And those goals could be units that rent at or below county family median income for a 2-person household, meets the demand for smaller units, or provides dedicated housing for seniors and veterans. The design of these units would be compatible with the neighborhood and provide more diversity of housing types. And just as a side note, if you have not looked at some of the cutting-edge design in prefab modular units, I encourage you to look at the factory OS units that are coming out. There's some in Truckee. South Lake Tahoe is going to see some installed courtesy of St. Joseph's Land Trust. So pretty cool to see what's happening with design of some of these prefab units. Article 336 of the Development Code is titled Affordable Housing Incentives. The page is blank. There are no incentives there yet. So why not include the first incentive as the alternative or exception to the Sun Valley 2-story limit to encourage needed diverse housing for the Sun Valley kids and grandkids who will be looking for a place to live in the future. Having multifamily residential units in Sun Valley not only benefits that community, but also the county as a whole. According to a recent Reno Gazette-Journal article, more than 4,000 rental units are under construction in the Reno-Sparks area, and more than 4,000 units in the planning stage. Whether those materialize or not is subject to question. But whether all those units will be enough to offset the county-wide shortage remains to be seen. So the potential impact of your changes here tonight may take some time to be noticeable. Washoe County is growing and changing. I have no doubt my own area will look different in 20 years. The development code needs to change to meet the needs of a growing county. Please support your staff recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next I have Heidi Soper.
Hello, I'm Heidi Soper. I'm on the Sun Valley Cab, and I speak to a lot of people about different problems and their opinions in our community. So I'm not here with all kinds of numbers and everything else. I'm here with opinions and feelings of our citizens. I've lived in Sun Valley for 36 years, raising 2 kids as a single mom. I bought my home there because going home from school and work felt like going home in the country. That country spirit is throughout the valley, And everyone I've spoken with loves it and wants it to stay that way. We are against Article 218, removing the two-story restriction from the master plan. If we wanted a different atmosphere, we would live somewhere else. I've been told that developers want larger buildings than 2 stories. If they really want a business or project in Sun Valley, then they need to abide by the people who will support the projects they want to build. Hobie's is a perfect example. They are very successful and 2 stories tall. We have major infrastructure problems that need to be taken care of before more major building is done. I hope you will consider the will of the people in your discussions and your decision, and thank you for letting me share their opinions and feelings.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Mark Newman, followed by Paola Agerman.
Good evening, Commissioners and Board. For the record, my name is Mark Newman. I'm here as well to speak on this. For the record, I am on the Sun Valley Citizens Advisory Board, the Sun Valley GID, Washoe County Open Space and Regional Parks, Washoe County Senior Services Citizens Advisory Board. I am not speaking for any one of those, so don't get confused with any of that. I am here just speaking from what I hear from the people in my community on removing the height limit of in making up the 3 stories. Originally, when this came, the Chocolate Drive project came in front of you guys a couple years ago, you guys turned down the Chocolate Drive apartments, and it got pushed through and overstepped, and it really sucks when you guys are spending all your time to do what's best for the community, and the commissioners say, you don't care. We wanted single-family homes, affordable homes that a working class could buy. You can buy those new prefabbed houses and put them on slabs for pretty damn cheap and put 4 per acre, and a working class person would have a house to live in and a yard for them to play in with the kids. Now this that they're talking about, even if you rent an apartment, they're removing the grass, removing your balcony, so now you have to go to the common area, which the pool is only open 3 months a year, but you can go to the common area at the pool and play. Is the way I look at this is you've got a couple Twinkies in here and the rest of the whole big dump truck is full of horse manure. I would advise you not to vote for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Paola Agerman, followed by Carol Burns.
Hi there. My name is Paola Gramon, and I am a receptionist at CSD, and I've also participated in the outreach efforts that we've had for the Spanish-speaking residents of Sun Valley and also North Valleys as well. And from what I've heard, and also being a resident of Sun Valley, I'm actually in favor of removing the 2-story limit, because from what I heard from the constituents, it sounds like we all would like that area to be developed a lot differently than what it's currently being developed as. So it's great to have medium-density suburban areas, but at the same time, we would like some of the similar services that Reno and Sparks offers their residents, like a library, emergency rooms, more apartments, if any apartments, because I don't even think we have any in that area. But yeah, we would love to see that. Yeah, so that's all my comments. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now we have Carol Burns, followed by Dave Snellgrove.
My name is, can you hear me? My name is Carol Burns. I'm a resident of Sun Valley. I want to thank the Planning Commission for standing with us on our objection of the Chocolate Drive development, although the commissioners did approve it. Now the county wants to eliminate our restriction in our master plan of no development over 2 stories tall. This is a master plan that was developed 25 years ago and thoughtfully included this restriction. Our valley is rural urban, I guess you could call it. We see mountain vistas in every direction. Even the Chocolate Drive development is inappropriate to our master plan. That mentions structures shall be located to eliminate and minimize silhouettes against the skyline. However, we want to keep the height restriction in order to keep large vertical developments out of Sun Valley. It was mentioned about casinos here. Possibly none of those speaking to us were even alive when Bill and Sherry Hera built our casino, which is only 2 stories tall. It became Sherry's in the divorce. I know of no other casinos that were ever planned to be built there. We do not feel this restriction is inappropriate for our community and our future. Thank you.
Thank you. Lastly, in chambers, I have Dave Snellgrove.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Dave Snellgrove. I'm speaking as an individual on this, but I do work as a land use planner and land use consultant here in the community. Worked on many affordable housing projects over time. I've bent Chris's ear as we worked on the Ridges of Sun Valley together, and that exposed some of the challenges. That was a year and a half ago, give or take. Some of the things that I think are really, really good and positive in this, that 50% requirement for turf is a huge challenge. We were working on the Ridges project at a slope site, trying to find realistic usable turf, but there was really no way around it. So I'm very supportive of usable turf areas, but the way the code's written right now, it basically is a blanket. You've got to provide 50% of your required landscape as turf, and it was very challenging, especially with some slopes. So talk about Sun Valley in particular, on the western side of Sun Valley Boulevard, you do have slopes, and it's a pretty consistent slope. Not a super heavy slope, but it's consistent enough. It's very challenging to provide those usable areas. We were able to create pockets, but it didn't get us up to the 50%. So I am very supportive of that. We talked about the balconies and decks. The requirement for the balcony and deck size, you won't find any apartments in town that have that size. I think there were 75 square feet minimum requirement for upper stories. I think there were 140 square feet for a ground floor deck. Some of that really starts to put in when you're cantilevering out, you start to push into your setback area, which then decreases density. Sun Valley Boulevard, and I'll talk about that in particular, you do have a bus line going up there. And if there were more people on the bus, if you had some nodes of intensity out there, you may be able to get more regular bus service out there. I feel that the 2- and 3-story conversation that's been going on, because you do have some slopes, we were able to there's a part of the building code that says if the ground floor is more than 50% buried, it doesn't count as a story. So if you go look at the Ridges of Sun Valley, that looks like 3-story from one side, it's 2 stories, but by building code standards, it only counts as a 2-story. When you're working with certain elevation in hillside adaptive architecture, to have certain allowances in it is very positive. And if part of this is trying to create reasonably priced housing and affordable level housing, we need to be focusing on those things. So with that, I do support the changes that are being made.
Thank you.
I have no further comment in chambers. I don't see any hands raised on Zoom. So it looks like that's it for public comment.
Okay, I will close public comment and bring it back to the board for discussion and questions. Do we have any discussions?
This is Linda. I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
In your presentation, there were charts with numbers on the left axis. What were those numbers related to? They weren't labeled.
Kat Oakley, Washoe County Planning. I'm just going to pull up the chart so I can make sure I'm talking about the right one. So So those,
Yes.
yes, those are number of households. And so you see kind of the standard bell curve in both the blue, which is owner-occupied units, and then in the orange, which is renter-occupied units. So overall, less renter-occupied than owner-occupied units in Washoe County. I think we all would expect to see that. And what this really shows that was meaningful to us was that that bell curve for renter-occupied units is shifted more towards the lower end in terms of vehicles per household. And household being, the group of people that would live in a dwelling unit. And that relates to the overall trend where there's been a significant decrease in household size over the last several decades. And so that's all that's intended to show, and it's in numbers of households in 10,000 per household increments.
And then I have one more question about parking. In the documentation, you mentioned about multimodal and public transportation. And my only concern is a lot of Washoe County doesn't have any public transportation where people have to have parking. And that's my only concern is limiting parking where they don't have an alternative to a car. Was that looked into? I mean, it'd be nice in the future, but right now it's really not there.
Cat Oakley, Washoe County Planning again. So yes, we did think about that. And kind of the thing to note about the proposed change is that they apply to multifamily housing only. The single-family duplex parking minimums are remaining as they are. And when you look at most of the county, of course, there's not transit in most of the county. Most of the county is not bikeable. But where you see are very few multifamily developments are in those areas that are closer in, where there might be fixed route transit, there might be RTC Flex Transit, which has been a very successful program. They've kind of expanded more into the more suburban areas. And so where you will see those new proposed parking minimums take effect will be in the areas that those other options are more available to people.
Was there any conversation with RTC about their plans to increase their coverage in some of these areas should this happen?
Good evening, Eric Young, planner in the planning program. Yes, we have spoken with RTC. RTC, in fact, has been going around to the cabs making presentations on the expansion of their Flex Ride program. They just made the presentation at the Sun Valley Cab the other day about the expansion of that program. It's also happening in Spanish Springs, which is one of the other spots. I think the point being that we're just not going to see the zoning that would support this kind of development outside of very few spots. And RTC is developing mostly their Flex Ride. That is really where they're pushing their transit right now. They're getting success with it. And they find it efficient. People like it. So that's kind of, if you don't know what that is, Flex Ride is kind of like a public Uber. You call RTC and they'll come and pick you up, and then it'll be in a van with some other people probably that take you around. But it's not a fixed route transit system, right? So it is a little bit different that we're going to have to learn to get used to talking about that. That's RTC's push. But they are really developing that in the places like Spanish Springs and Sun Valley where we have the type of zoning that would support this kind of development. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Do you have any more questions, Linda?
No, those are my questions. Thank you.
All right. Has anybody else got any questions? Go ahead.
Commissioner Dodge, a clarification, Chris, if I may. You mentioned you just had another meeting in Sun Valley this month, and you mentioned there were 30 people there, but you really didn't go into what they said or what issues you resolved at that point.
Eric Young, Washoe County Planner. I was the planner that attended that meeting. We get those numbers from, 30 from the communications team that tells us how many people were there. What I would say is that I heard exactly what you heard tonight from the public input. I think there may have been one person there that was, maybe two that were supportive of increased housing. The vast majority of people were concerned about multifamily. There were a handful of people who said the increase of the story height is okay, but I don't want multifamily. That was just a couple of people. The majority of people talked about scenic vistas. They talked about the historic nature of the two-story limitation. And they strongly voiced their opposition to multifamily development in general. I did not go with a presentation like this and attempt to bring anybody along or change anybody's mind. My goal was to let them know where these changes are coming from, why we're presenting them, and how important it was to show up tonight and let you know how they felt about it. And so that's how I would summarize my experience at that meeting.
Mr. Chairman. Are you done? You're next.
Yes.
This is Linda. I have another question. I'd like to ask why so many different issues were put together. I'm struggling with voting one way or the other if I like all but one. Is there a way we could make them not all lumped together?
So, Cat Oakley, Washoe County Planning, the reason these particular items are grouped together is because they all have to do with being regulatory barriers that exist in our code to diverse forms of housing development. Now, the Planning Commission today has the option to approve it as it's currently written, or has the option to approve it with modifications. And so that is something that could be discussed here, and then if you all decided that modifications were necessary to move it forward, that is an option at your disposal.
Okay. Can I ask, is anyone else uncomfortable with making a decision about everything at this point?
Well, I'm not 100% sure what you're referring to, Linda. Go ahead.
My question is, we have multiple issues that we're voting on with one vote, where I agree with most of them, but not all of them. Is there a way we can break them out?
Well, that's possible. That's possible. When we get to the motion, right now we're not at the part about making a motion. Right now we're asking questions and discussing.
Yeah,
We can-
that's why I'm
After all
asking.
the questions are done, we can definitely discuss that if you'd like.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Chair, if I could add just one other thought too. Keep in mind, the Planning Commission for this item is a recommending body. So you can certainly make a recommendation to support certain parts of the request, to modify others, and then forward that recommendation onto the County Commission. So certainly that purview is within the realm of this board.
Sure.
Okay.
I think we understand
My
that.
turn.
Go ahead.
Thank you,
Yes,
sir.
Go ahead.
I have a question on the height issue. Are we saying by increasing the height limit that you can have a three-story apartment? Or are we saying that we're having a two-story, but it's a limitation on the height based upon topography?
I think any of us could answer that. This is Eric. What the proposal is to remove the section in the Sun Valley modifiers that limits all residential, commercial, and industrial to what's called 2 stories. And when that's removed, all height would be regulated by the underlying zoning. So for instance, most residential zoning has a 35-foot height limit. The vast majority does throughout the county. When you get into the urban zoning, low-density urban, medium, and high-density urban, the height limit increases. It goes up to 60. So the underlying zoning in those zoning districts would go up to 60 feet, and the allowable zoning in the rest of the single family would be 35 feet. As we see building permits throughout Washoe County, the 35 feet for a single-family home occurs in two places, Montreux and Incline Village. 35 feet is not a normal house. The vast majority of two-story houses will fall right around the 27-foot mark, 25 to 27-foot mark, in the way that we measure height. So that's, and then for a manufactured home that's one story or a stick-built that's one story, you would have that.
So an apartment complex with this height limit can have 3 stories.
With the new height limit, yes, it could.
As it stands now, it cannot.
It cannot, as it stands now.
And even the underlying zone doesn't allow it.
The underlying zoning throughout most of Sun Valley does not allow that. There's a handful of zonings that do allow it. But then, of course, this board sees on a regular basis requests to rezone, right? So one of the things we'd want to keep in mind is that possibility for rezoning up and down Sun Valley Boulevard where it may be appropriate.
Okay. That, go ahead, Kat.
Sorry, Kat Oakley, Washoe County Planning. Just to clarify that, so in the majority of Sun Valley, multifamily housing, apartment complex in general are not an allowed use. And that's true of most of Sun Valley and most of the county, right? In the places where that, if an apartment were allowed in a zoning district now or in the future, right now, it could only be 2 stories, and with this change, yes, it could go up to 3 stories.
Okay. So basically, for the most part, you're looking at commercial development going a 3rd story?
There is a relatively large amount of commercial zoning in Sun Valley along the Sun Valley Boulevard corridor. A lot of it is neighborhood commercial, some of it's general commercial, and right now that's also limited to 2 stories. And so another benefit of removing the 2-story height limit is that there would be more potential and flexibility for commercial and mixed-use type development along that corridor as well.
Yeah, go on. Okay, thank you. I applaud the attempt to make the code.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Flick, can you speak into the mic, please?
Oh, okay. Am I on? Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. I applaud trying to get rid of the bureaucratic log jams that every development suffers, be it a single-family dwelling or a subdivision or commercial. But the bottom line is that going to be passed on to the individual that's trying to rent or buy? If the demand is such that there's not enough product to satisfy the demand, with all these shortcuts that we're talking about, are going to be a windfall for the developer. And I'm certainly not advocating price control or anything like that, but I'm just saying that it's nice to do it, but have so much demand right now that these relaxing of requirements or streamlining the requirements aren't going to provide the intended consequences of going ahead with this. And one last thing I'd like to say. On the bicycle racks, we don't go into how many bicycle racks or how many bicycles are going to be in one rack. There's also, you see them everywhere, the electric bikes, that's another category. And then you see these scooters going all over the place. I'm just wondering if those are going to be accommodated by this change or what?
Specifically, the electric bikes and scooters, not specifically is designed for bicycles.
Exactly, okay.
These are available for electric bikes, of course, and storage for electric bikes. That question in general is going to be important, especially up an incline. So we're going to have to start thinking about those across the board, but not. It's not a real comprehensive from scooter up to Vespa approach. It's more to begin to get people to start thinking about providing these. Mr. Chair, may I respond to the incentive package that Chairman Plick was concerned about?
Yes.
You bring up a really good point about incentives for developers. And I have to agree that there's a line between, how much is given away the house, so to speak. You don't want to do that, right? But you want to make sure that property doesn't sit undeveloped forever. And we are working with that threshold in Sun Valley, and we've been doing that for decades, trying to incentivize private investment. The public investment is on board. RTC, NDOT, the county trying to do the appropriate transportation improvements that are critically needed. The school district, senior services. There's so much really solid quality public investment. And we need to do something to crack the door for private investment. Because up and down Sun Valley Boulevard, that's been a challenge. You've seen some new investment residentially out on the edges of Sun Valley, and you've seen a couple of developments going recently that have been talked about here. But that corridor up and down Sun Valley continues to be problematic with private investment. So these incentives are designed to try and get private investment to come along and do something with their property. And finding that line between where's too much and giving away the house, we try really hard to keep that in mind when we come up with these incentives. That's a really quality point, and I want to let you know that we are thinking about it. But we think that this is what it takes to get people to come out there and spend some money.
Put their money up.
Yeah.
This is Linda. Is it possible for me to make a motion at this point?
No, we're not ready for that yet, Linda. We still got a couple
let
more
me-
questions, but
Okay, but before we have the main motion, I would like to make another motion, so let me make that.
you betcha. If you could just hold off for a few, then we'll
Sure.
get right back with you. Go ahead.
Sure. I'd like to thank staff for the excellent job that they've done taking the Washoe 2040 big effort in master planning and rolling that straight into the code amendment process, which I know is a lot more fine-toothed and nitty-gritty and and it's hard to maintain that momentum. So thank you for continuing to bring these packages to us. I know that we've hammered on this a lot, but I'd just like to clarify. Does what's before us create any new multifamily zoning anywhere?
Cat Oakley, Washoe County Planning, no, it does not.
Does what's before us allow anyone to build anything taller than they can build right now under current code?
In feet, no, it does not.
So if I have a single-family parcel in Sun Valley right now, I can build a 35-foot tall, two-story house. And under this change, I could build a 35-foot tall, three-story house if that were my preference.
That is correct.
And there's no density increase created here. There's no rezoning. I know we've gotten into a lot of speculative discussion about what might come down the road in the future in terms of other people's proposals later, but right now we're not changing any density, any increases in terms of what's allowed.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I got one question for you, Kat. This is Rob. Did you say there's no affordable housing plan in Sun Valley right now? I thought I heard you say there's like no existence or no plan for affordable housing or anything. Maybe I misheard.
Cat Oakley, Washoe County Planning. There are 2 affordable housing developments in Sun Valley that have previously been approved.
Okay. Okay.
Chris Bronzik, Washoe County Planning. So currently, there are 2 affordable housing projects that have been previously approved. The first one is Ridges at Sun Valley. That one is currently under construction. The second one is a multifamily project called Chocolate Drive, off of Chocolate Drive, that has approvals, entitlement approvals, but have not started construction at this time.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. So Linda, what were your concerns? Go ahead and
what I wanted to do was to, instead of voting on this as one, I wanted to have a motion to break it up and vote on it by article.
Really?
Could I propose
Yes.
a counter proposal that we vote on it as one first, and if it doesn't pass, then we can go through one at a time?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, that's fine.
So do we have any more discussion or questions?
Do we need a motion to that?
I'll be happy to make that single motion. Rob was just checking to make sure if there was any further discussion.
Make sure everybody's ready. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I move that after giving reasoned consideration to the information contained in the staff report and information received during the public hearing, the Washoe County Planning Commission initiate amendments to the Washoe County Development Code and recommend approval of WDCA 24-0002 to amend Washoe County Code Chapter 110 of the Development Code within Articles 216, 218, 410, 412, 432, and 902 as reflected within the proposed ordinance contained in Exhibit A1. I further move to authorize the chair to sign the resolution contained in Exhibit A on behalf of the Washoe County Planning Commission and to direct staff to present a report of this commission's recommendation to the Washoe County Board of County Commissioners within 60 days of today's date. This recommendation for approval is based on the ability to make all 4 findings set forth in Washoe County Code Section 110.818.15E.
All right, we have a motion. Do I have a second?
Commissioner Donchik, I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
Okay, we have, the motion passes. We have 1 nay. Thank you.
So are we going to break it up?
No, it passed.
What's that?
You just said if it didn't pass, we'd break it up.
It passed.
Well, we just passed the motion. you voted against it, but there was enough of us that it passed. There was 4 of us, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, and 1 against. So that brings us on to item 9C, the NV Energy one, because we're putting the short-term rentals last. So this is special use permit case number WSUP 23-0032 for Nevada Energy. Mr. Lloyd, could you please announce?
All right. For hearing, discussion, and possible action to approve a special use permit for a major public facility use type for NV Energy to construct, operate, and maintain a new 10.8-mile-long, I'll break it up, 11.9 miles including California and Nevada portion, 6.8 miles in Washoe County, 4.1 miles in the city of Reno, and 1.1 miles in California. 120 kV overhead transmission line connecting the California substation near Verdi to the Border Town substation. The project will entail 53,000 cubic yards of excavation for access road widening, and the applicant is requesting to waive all landscaping and parking requirements and to vary the maximum height of the applicable regulatory zones to allow for the pole heights as high as 105 feet. The project meets the standard for a project of regional significance because it entails construction of a transmission line that carries 60 kV or more. It will require approval by the regional planning authorities before any approval at the county level would take effect. This project also requires amendments to the regional utility corridor map of the 2019 Truckee Meadows Regional Plan to identify the location of the new transmission line. As this project encompasses areas within Washoe County and the city of Reno, the Regional Planning Commission will sponsor the changes to the regional utility corridor map in one single amendment, as opposed to the Washoe County Commission and the City of Reno City Council sponsoring individual amendments. This project will need to comply with all federal and state approvals before any approval at the county level would take effect. And just for your edification, you're only approving the Washoe County section, not the City of Reno section.
Okay.
Representing Washoe County in this matter is Planner Tim Evans.
Okay, Tim, hold on a second. Do we have any disclosures?
Yeah. Commissioner Lazareski, I am currently employed by NV Energy on their transmission construction team. And while I am not assigned to this project and don't have any personal or pecuniary interest in it, in the interest of no appearance of conflict of interest, I'll be recusing myself from this.
Okay, that's okay with legal.
Thank you, Commissioner Lazareski. So you will be asked to exit the room. And please, someone remember when this item is over to bring Mr. Lazareski back into the room. Thank you.
Let's wait until he walks out. All right, go ahead, Tim.
Thank you. Tim Evans, planner. So the case before you today is special use permit case number WSUP 23-0032 for the NV Energy transmission line. So the request before you today, as mentioned earlier, is for a special use permit. So this special use permit is for a major public facility use type for a 10.8 mile long transmission line. And so within that transmission line, it's broken down based on jurisdiction, just to give everyone some background. So there will be 6.8 miles is within Washoe County, 4.1 miles is within the city of Reno, and 1.1 miles of that line is actually in the state of California. And in addition, this special use permit is also for the modification of standards to waive all civic, landscaping, and parking requirements, vary the maximum height of 35 feet to allow the proposed transmission line poles to be up to a maximum of 105 feet, and vary the slope requirements set forth in Article 438, grading standards to allow temporary slopes steeper than 3:1. As mentioned earlier, this project is a project of regional significance because it entails the construction of a transmission line that carries 60 kilovolts or more. This line will carry 120, kilovolts through this transmission line, and it will require an amendment to the regional utility corridor map. So this transmission line will traverse through 27 parcels, and it is located within the Verdi and North Valleys planning areas. And through these 27 parcels, the zoning varies from low-density suburban to public, semi-public facilities, general rural, and open space. And so here's a site plan. It is somewhat difficult to see the actual line itself. It's denoted by the purple line on there, and the whitish colored boxes actually within the staff report itself. The staff report ended up being in the neighborhood of about 600 pages. But buried within there is the breakdown for what each one of those actual boxes entails, what it shows. And I do have some others on the following slides. Okay, so this first one here is actually from the Verdi substation in California going through Verdi. So this is a zoomed in view of that and where that transmission line will go. One important point to note is that the actual transmission line that is in Verdi, there is one existing there. So this is just the replacement of that portion of the line. This part in Verdi will not be new. In fact, to elaborate more, it'll end up being that the transmission line that is there is going to be removed, and they're going to put up a new one, and it's going to actually have less poles than currently exists today. And so here's the end part, the actual 90-degree part. At the very end of Verdi, on the far northeast side of Verdi, that the line is going to make a 90-degree turn and head north up towards the border town. Okay, so the whole purpose of this extension. So what's the real purpose? So the real purpose of this extension, to summarize what is there on the screen, is to provide reliable bulk transmission capacity to West Reno consistent with the North American Electric Reliability Corporation Standard TPL-002-0. So it's really just to provide more reliable electrical power to that part of Reno. Okay, so as mentioned earlier, so this project will traverse through multiple different jurisdictions. One of them that this property or this transmission line is going to cross is United States Forest Service property. And due to that being the case, an environmental impact statement had to be prepared. And this is a very intense process. The process itself took about 7 years from start to finish for them to look at all the different types of proposed transmission line locations that could potentially occur, as well as biological impacts, wildlife impacts as a whole. So it's all the environmental stuff that was looked at in detail over the last 7 years for this project, before it even came to Washoe County for the special use permit. So, as I stated, the one big key point to make is that the EIS identified positive and negative effects to the environment. So this would include biological resources, plants, animals, wildlife, things like that, and offered alternative actions, including inaction in relation to the proposed project. And so after this EIS was prepared, the actual line that was chosen and the best path that was chosen out of that analysis is the line that is before you today. So this will be an unmanned transmission line. It will entail 78 poles along the 10.8 mile route, and 52 of those poles will be within the unincorporated part of Washoe County. And the pole heights will vary from less than 35 feet to 105 feet tall in various locations. One important point to note is that within the Verdi area, where I mentioned earlier that there is an existing line, through there, those lines or those poles will not be any taller than 35 feet. It's going to be 35 feet or less. There's not going to be a 105-foot tall pole in there. And so the average spacing between those poles is going to be in the neighborhood of 800 feet. It could be upwards of 2,000 feet depending upon the location along the line. And the actual corridor width will be anywhere from 300 to 600 feet in width. And that will vary depending upon where it's at along the line. And so this line will be located within existing public utility easements, new public utility easements, as well as federal permits / rights-of-way and existing regional utility corridors. So as far as grading goes, there will be an extensive amount of grading for this project to the tune of 53,000 cubic yards. One thing very important point to note is that this is temporary grading. So they're gonna go ahead just to put the actual line up. They're gonna do some extensive grading to create access roads and widen the existing access roads that are there. And then once the whole project is complete, then it's all gonna be reclaimed and returned back to its original state. And that was one of the things that came out of that environmental impact statement that I mentioned earlier. So that's one of the requirements of the U.S. Forest or the United States Forest Service is to reclaim and put everything back to the way it was before. And so another point to note is that a building permit will be required for the grading, and it will be subject to the Article 438 grading standards. And as mentioned earlier, one of the waivers that are being requested for this project is the slope standard of 3:1, and I'll discuss that a little bit more later in the presentation. Okay, so the transmission line, it does traverse habitat for mule deer and black bear per the wildlife maps in the master plan. That being said, the project information was provided to the Nevada Department of Wildlife for review, and they informed staff that they have been working with NV Energy on minimization and mitigation measures specifically for this and all wildlife that would be potentially impacted. And they also commented on the environmental impact statement throughout that 7-year process or approximate 7-year process that I mentioned earlier. And a very important point to note is that there was a wildlife protection plan that was created specifically for this project to address and create mitigations to protect wildlife. And it was prepared by Stantec Consulting with multiple mitigation measures. In addition to the environmental impact statement mentioned earlier, also had wildlife mitigation measures as well. So they all combined together to have a very substantial amount of mitigation specifically to protect wildlife and other biological resources for this project. That being said, so Exhibit A of the staff report does include 17 conditions that were pulled from those documents and is being included to help ensure that those mitigations are set forth and carried out. So the modifications. So there are 4 modifications that are being requested. The first one is that the maximum height be 105 feet instead of 35 feet. And so staff is supportive of this request as the maximum height requirement of 105 feet is a typical height for these types of projects and pole heights. As mentioned earlier, it's not going to be that there's going to be 78 poles that are 105 feet tall. It's going to be just a few of them or a limited amount. And so, again, staff is supportive of that. And so the second request to waive standards is for the landscaping standards, and staff is supportive of this due to the actual landscaping. It just doesn't make sense in that area to require commercial or civic landscaping uses along a transmission corridor that is pretty much for the most part out in the middle of nowhere, and there's no available water to take care of any landscaping like that. And the third modification that is being requested is in relation to the parking requirements. So this, as mentioned earlier, is an unmanned transmission line, so there's no real reason to have any parking required for this type of project. So staff is supportive of waiving that requirement entirely. And the fourth waiver that they are seeking is for the 3-to-1 slope set forth in Article 438 grading standards, and staff supports the request to vary the slope requirements of Article 438 to allow slopes greater than 3-to-1, as the slopes will be temporary and the areas would be, as mentioned earlier, reclaimed back to their original state. An important point to note about this is that engineering also reviewed this in detail, and they concur with this as well. Okay, so for this project, there was a neighborhood meeting that was held. It was held on August 30th of last year, 2023, at 6 o'clock, and there were various public concerns that were brought up. And so some of those concerns were the location of the line, whether there would be an increase or decrease in the number of pole structures, the possibility of undergrounding, due to fire risk and things like that. That was a concern, as well as what pole structures would look like, and if there would be any aeronautical impacts. So as far as that goes, the response by the consultant, which is CFA Consulting, was in relation to the location of the proposed transmission line. CFA Consulting provided a presentation during the neighborhood meeting, which addressed some of those questions in relation to the actual location of it. In relation to the second comment that was received, which was in relation to the number of poles, the comment that the consultant made was that there will actually be a decrease in net removal of 11 poles. So that's in a good sense, in a very good sense. And so the third public comment that was received was in relation to undergrounding. So the consultant's response was, undergrounding the transmission line requires a disturbance of a much larger area, and the costs to do that would be passed on to ratepayers. So that is something that their response in relation to that comment. And the fourth comment that they received during the neighborhood meeting was, what would structures look like? Would it be metal? Would it be wood? And the support structures will all be metal poles. Okay, so, and then the very last concern was aeronautical impacts. And as far as staff knows and the consultant, there will be no impacts to aeronautical. There would be no aeronautical impacts that we're aware of. Okay, so as far as the reviewing agencies, this project was sent out for review to 23 agencies, and we received comments from 5 of those agencies, and their comments have been made conditions in Exhibit A of the staff report. And so there was a substantial amount of public notices that went out for this project. There was a total of 860 property owners that were noticed, and we received 20 public comments as of this morning, and 9 of those comments were just general inquiries, and the remaining 11 were against the project. So staff is able to make all required findings as detailed on pages 17 and 18 in the staff report. And the staff recommends the Planning Commission approve special use permit case number WSUP 24-0032 and provides the motion on the screen. An important point to note about the motion is that this motion here is slightly different than the motion that was in the staff report. And there's a reason for that. The reason being is that I'm going to be suggesting here in a second that 2 conditions be added to Exhibit A. And so that motion language, as well as those conditions, were emailed to you earlier today. And so in this actual motion, just to point out the section that it shows that the amendment, it should be, okay, so it says included as Exhibit A as amended. And that's all that was added into this motion, was just those 2 words there. Exactly. All right, so as far as the 2 conditions that are being recommended, so the first condition is specifically in relation to having like an overarching condition for all the conditions. And this overarching condition is to address that we don't have our conditions impact or conflict with the requirements in the environmental impact statement. So anything that the federal government's going to require, that takes precedence over what ours states. So that's really what that first bullet point states there. And so the second condition, it's actually an amendment to an existing condition that's in Exhibit A. And so what is being added is the yellow portion, which states, for construction on sections of the power line that are greater than 1/2 mile from any existing legally established residential use, construction activities shall be limited to the hours between 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Sunday. And the purpose of this is that it just doesn't make sense to have out in the middle of nowhere along this transmission line to make it where they can't do construction maybe a little bit longer, a little bit earlier in the day. So that's the purpose of adding that. And so staff is available for any questions. And the applicant also, or the applicant's representative, also has a presentation as well.
Okay, if the applicant would like, he can make his presentation now.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair Pierce, and members of the Commission. For the record, I'm Dave Snellgrove with CFA Bowman. We're working with NB Energy, and we have team members from NV Energy here to answer questions that you have. I believe we have some online too, but I'll kind of look back at Mark Sullivan, who many of you are probably very familiar with over time. He's been up here many, many times before. The last item that Tim talked about, since I don't really have it in my presentation specifically, I'm appreciative of the conversations that we were able to have with Brittany Lemons with Truckee Meadows Fire and with Tim, and I talked to Trevor about the condition changes. Given that the federal process is so lengthy and so intensive, and there's 100 stipulations on this from the federal government, the last thing you want to do is create a condition that kind of overrides or runs in conflict. Once you guys decide and other boards decide, kind of goes out of staff's hands, and if it's written in black and white, it becomes a challenge. You see a lot of condition amendments or different things come before you or through the board. I'm trying to avoid that for my client here and trying to make it work both for the county and for NV Energy. So Tim went through a lot of this in terms of what the application request is. It's a 120 kV power line that'll run between Verdi and Cold Springs. There's a California substation down near Verdi, and the Bordertown substation up in the Cold Springs area behind the Bordertown area. This does represent a project of regional significance, and we do have a portion of this line running north-south until it gets into the Alturas power corridor or power line corridor that will be a new regional utility corridor. I'll cover that a little bit more detail later. Tim mentioned, and I'll reiterate, that this went through that U.S. Forest Service process with a final environmental impact statement and a final record of decision. That record decision came out in June of 2019. So the current power line runnings that we have, the regional utility corridors basically run along and run parallel in these areas to Interstate 80 and to 395. Doesn't really, close off a triangle. And one of the challenges with that is that if one of these lines fails, it can take down the whole area. So part of what NV Energy is required to do per the NERC standards, they have mandatory transmission standards to provide reliable service in the instance of a power line failure. And that's what this intended route is to do. So it basically creates an alternative route. Part of the challenge, and I'm on a learning curve. I'm not an electrical engineer or anything, so I've got to learn this. So hopefully I can explain it in fairly simple terms. If something happened, if we followed those existing regional utility corridor routes, and something happened along Interstate 80, there's a big fire, there's something that happened that took that line down, probably takes this line down too, so you really haven't accomplished anything. Given a diversity in area, if something's happening in one area, it may be happening in the other, but it's more likely that it won't be. So you now do have a redundancy in source that won't end up taking down all of West Reno or a big part of West Reno. That's part of why this needs to be done. So this map comes off of the Washoe County GIS, and it's really helpful. The purple areas are the city of Reno property. The green areas are in Washoe County, but they're actually U.S. Forest Service owned. Now, I mentioned before that we went through the U.S. Forest Service review process. A majority of the portion of the line that's in Washoe County is actually in Forest Service land, which the landowner reviewed and gave us stipulations very specific to what they want to see. There are portions that are in Washoe County that aren't in Forest Service land, but where this line is running largely through the Washoe County unincorporated area is within Forest Service property. Now, an odd area, and this one's kind of challenging. When you get out in the Verdi area, the blue areas are city of Reno land in the city limits. The purple areas on here are city of Reno sphere of influence areas. And those sphere of influence areas don't necessarily follow the parcel lines. So there are a couple parcels in here that are part in the city sphere and part not. Now, NV Energy happens to own both of those. I don't know that they necessarily care, but the one that runs over on the left-hand side or right-hand side of the page, it stops kind of mid-parcel and parts in the city sphere and parts in the county. What this map shows you is something that Tim talked about, and I'll help illustrate. The top map is where existing pole structures are. Those red ones are going to come out. That circuit, that line and the power will still remain, but what's going to happen with that power is they're going to go on, there's 21 poles that are there in the red, and there's 10 poles that are in the green down below. Those are the new pole locations out to pole number 14. They're going to joint circuit it, so they'll have one circuit above and one circuit below, so that they're going to try and consolidate into a narrower area without putting up another structure. They're actually going to get rid of 11 structures from this area. Some of them will be taller than where they are now because you've got greater clearance heights and there are requirements for line separation. But there will be few structures going through this section. I wanted to help illustrate where we're losing those pole structures that are currently out there. So, Tim did a great job running through this. One thing about the access roads, I'll just go down to the bottom here. The access roads will predominantly use existing Forest Service access roads. Some roads will have to be widened to get construction equipment in there. I went out up into the hills, and some of the roads are pretty challenging. My car's not the beefiest, but it can get through most things, and they were a little stressful. So some of these areas that they'll be going on the Forest Service roads will have to be widened. It'll be temporary grading that'll be done on that because the Forest Service is requiring that that widening area that get reclaimed and that get basically brought back to the way it was. Odds are the surface of the road will be better than many of them are based on my driving on some of those here recently. So this is a copy of the final environmental impact statement and the record of decision. You can go on to the U.S. Forest Service site. If you go in, if you want to go and search, if you type in final record of decision, border down to California, 120 kV transmission line project, I bet if you type part of that in, you'll probably come up with this. So you don't have to type all that green stuff that I have there. You could probably search for it that way. If you're an interested person online or here in the room and you haven't seen this, I'd encourage you to go take a look at it. But part of what the final record of decision states, and I'll quote, provides the needed benefit of reliable electric transmission capacity to the west side of Reno, consistent with the reliability standards that NV Energy is mandated to achieve. That comes directly out of the federal government's record of decision. So I'm not big, I just got done reading one, but I felt this was important too in some of the comments that we've heard. So part of the federal EIS in their chosen alternative route, and this map here shows the different routes that were chosen. They're coming from the Border Town subdivision. You see the green line that goes farther over into California. That's the Mitchell alternative. The one that comes more straight down but then goes into California at the end and comes down rather than going through Verdi, that was the Peavine alternative. Then you have, oh, thank you. And then you have a yellow connection, it comes down, that's actually the Peavine Poleville alternative. The purple line that follows the Alturas power line and then comes down over Peavine, that's the Peavine alternative. And then they looked at the do nothing alternative, don't put anything out there. So these were all the alternatives that were looked at, and where they came to was kind of a hybrid between the Peavine and the Poleville alternative. It was a collapsing of those two that they felt was best, and they looked at a lot of different considerations. But this was chosen, this alternative would use a regionally designated utility corridor east of the California substation and federally designated portions of Section 368 Energy Corridor near Bordertown substation. This alternative minimizes routing across private land and avoids property listed on the National Registry of Historic Places. This route maximizes crossing land previously disturbed by wildfire and minimizes crossing pine forests, communities, and avoids designated critical habitat for Weber, I'm not going to go there, a threatened plant species protected under the Endangered Species Act. This is sourced out of the final EIS for this project. Those orangish lines, those are our existing regional utility corridors. So other than going 395 over to I-80, there's really nothing in between. And with the growth in our community, the increasing demands for electricity from a variety of sources, not only just growth, but we're using more electricity. This is a necessary type project to have. Sorry, it has to create kind of a new route, but there's good reasons for it. So that is the chosen route there that's highlighted in yellow. So the Forest Service decision looked at land use and private property, public health and safety, visual resources, vegetation resources, special status plants, wildlife habitats, and cultural resources. And a lot of what I read before in their summary kind of goes through those other 6 or 7 bullet points that I have down below. We've heard concern about wildlife. We've heard concern about fire. Part of this was it's gone through previously burned areas, so there's less area to burn. It's probably an overly simplified version of what the Forest Service would look at in terms of part of their consideration. These are some views in the Verdi corridor. What this is the existing line that's out there. So on the western portion of Bridge Street, that's actually the top middle photo is looking to the west. That pole alignment on the right-hand side of that photo, that's the one that would go away. It'll be replaced with, that's where we have, instead of 21 total pole structures, we'll have a total of 10. That's part of that section. And then over on the eastern part of Bridge Street, because Bridge Street wraps up and comes back down closer to the California line, I have an east and west photo there that show something similar, just to kind of let you know where some poles would be coming down and what the new alignment would be following that, generally that existing alignment of where the poles will be taken down. This is up in the Cold Springs area. Now, this is actually up in part of the city of Reno, but I wanted to highlight this. This is a road that runs right next to the California state line. There's a kick in the line. I circled it in red. It's kind of where it is. But the Alturas power line is an existing regional utility corridor, and the line will be placed next to that. So we will be running jointly in that portion of the regional utility corridor, and you can see where it joins together, where the reddish-orangish line comes together with the blue line. That's where we will be in the same existing regional utility corridor. This is just an aerial view. These are built-in SketchUp. These are the poles in kind of relative heights. The unfortunate part, you don't have the houses at elevation here. But up this high, you know, the poles will look bigger. This is where the line goes out through Verdi and then all of a sudden heads due north. Tim had an image in his presentation that pointed that out on the eastern side of Verdi. Those orange lines and the 2 red poles are the existing line. There is an existing 120 kV line that runs there. We have some of our taller structures back here behind the West Meadows Estate subdivision. Part of the reason for that is that this line has to get up and over those existing lines that are north of it. So going up the hill, and if you look close there by the pond, a little bit to the left of it, you can see another structure. But I felt it would be helpful to show where the poles are. Now, they will be visible. I'm not going to stand here and tell you that the poles aren't going to be visible. They'll be in people's views. But the U.S. Forest Service has required a certain coloration to them that does a good job in terms of starting to blend in. I don't know how many times I've driven up 395 near the Alturas power lines, and I forget about them unless I'm thinking about them, but they're there all the time. Those are really close. These are going up over the hill. Now that we've had this presentation, you're going to start noticing power lines all over the place, I can tell you that. This image just kind of shows the alignment. It's really faint in blue, but going up and over, you can see where the treed areas are, and there's minimal forested vegetation. There's a lot of lower level vegetation through the route, but not as much taller vegetation. This just gives you an image looking, we're actually hovering above California here, and kind of give you an image on this western slope downward of the Peavine, kind of what the topography does. There are some ravines and canyons that have to go over, and there's a few longer extents that'll be made out there, but this is a good portion of the Washoe County segment of line. It shows you there's some diverse topography, but it also shows you that this is kind of a vacant area, not a real heavily vegetated area. So just go back, probably didn't need to put the slide in again, just gives you a way to get to the final record of decision, Border Town to California Transmission Line Project. If you search that, be able to get there. And then if you'll get to this page, and then down on the bottom has the link to the documents. So we agree with the staff's review and analysis of the application, and we agree with the recommendations for approval of the project and the modified conditions. We believe, as does staff, that all the legal findings can be made for this project, and we respectfully request your approval of the project this evening. be available for any questions.
Thank you. All right, this time I'd like to open up public comment. Do we have any public comment?
Sorry, Lloyd Labard, followed by Antoine Labard. Please state your first and last name for the record.
Good evening, Commission. For the record, my name is Lloyd Labard, and I'm here as an individual, although my children own the trust of the 120 acres that butt up against the project in the North Valleys. I'd like to start, they told me I had about 3 minutes. I'd like to start with a picture's worth 1,000 words. This is, he said he'd be able to put that up on the screen for us. Okay. I'm not sure. Are they going to dim that light so I can? Okay. So the original, if you can lower that a little bit, the original.
You'll have to do it manually.
You have to do it.
The camera's fixed. You'll have to move the paper around yourself.
Okay. What's going on there is you see that originally, less than 6 months ago, and I have Texas to prove that the original route was going straight, linear line, right? Which makes sense because it eliminates a whole bunch of poles and eliminates a whole bunch of lines, which is going to add to the cost of this project to the individuals that have to pay for the power. Plus, what they've done is they've come up right up against the property line, which is going to have an adverse effect on anybody that owns millions of dollars worth of property on this other side. Right? And you can see that the original one, it's hard for you to see on this one. If anybody would like to see this one, you can see, oh, this is mine that's up there? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so I didn't understand that, I'm sorry. You can see that, how come I can't get that to stay? Oh, okay, see this? See how linear that line's straight? And you can see that it's not going over very many trees at all. It's all sagebrush and very clear land. Very, very few trees removable. This is going into dense forest. It's going to have a huge environmental impact. Plus, here you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 poles. This one has almost 15. How is that first of all, it's my opinion that this last, these changes to the original are going to exacerbate the negative effects of wildlife habitat and green spaces and the overall biodiversity. We all need to advocate for responsibility of development practice and prioritize the well-being of wildlife and natural resources. These changes were made primarily to serve the interest of the developer. Because if you notice, this property that's up for development is exactly they're at the end of their line, at the end of their property line now. There's no reason whatsoever you would.
You can have another 15 seconds.
Sir, I'm sorry, you only have 3 minutes. That concludes your time. Thank you so much.
I was going to give him another 15 seconds because he had a little issue in the beginning.
Okay.
If we could just give him another 15 seconds, that would be
When Tim showed the
good.
original lines, he left this one out. All those lines he showed were almost linear. This one, as you can see, jogs in, jogs out, jogs back out, jogs over.
I don't see that on here.
And it doesn't take into consideration all the environmental aspects of what it's going to do up there. There's bears up there, deer up there.
Okay, sorry, sir. Thank you.
Next, we have Antoine Labard, followed by Warren Lyons.
My name is Antoine Labard. And so kind of like how my dad went through it, and I'll put that back on there if you guys want. But in the EIS, the environmental impact study and the environmental impact statement, it does shows all of the different routes, but it doesn't show this dog leg or whatever you call in it. That was added in the last 3 months. So that's been added to this. The EIS has to be reviewed. You guys have to check that. You have to see why that was added, what the purpose of it is, and it does go through a bunch of forest. It is going to affect the environment. It's backed up to our property. We have tons of wildlife out there, plant life, all kinds of different habitat. It's going to affect that ecosystem for sure. And I know that, Stonegate or whatever is going for reclassification and rezoning. I don't see, if they're not going to do the houses like they originally told everyone they're going to do, if they're going to do industrial, why that route cannot be changed to this route that they have where it's not highlighted, and what the purpose of this dog leg is, or the small part, and they're trying to shadow it. And I don't really have much else to say besides that. That's pretty much it. It definitely, the environmental impact study has to be reviewed. The environmental impact statement has to be reviewed regarding these changes.
Thank you. Next, we have Warren Lyons, followed by Ken McNeil. Just click something else.
Good evening, Commissioners. Warren Lyons. I live in the western edge of Somerset and Sierra Canyon. My concern is the decision not to underground these lines, given the wildfire history of the area and the more recent catastrophes in our neighbors to the west. The applicant has never provided a quantified estimate of the incremental cost to underground these lines versus the cost as currently presented. The EIS and the other documents also have never stated publicly what would it cost to underground these lines. I do think if you look at the number of households in this area, let's say it's 10,000 households that cost maybe $500,000 each, we're looking at a $5 billion infrastructure just for homes that would be at risk. We know what happened in California. It could happen here. And I would ask that you either defer or reject this application and ask for additional information to justify the decision to overhead versus to underground the lines. Thanks for your consideration.
Thank you.
Next, we have Ken McNeil, followed by Micheline Fairbank.
Good evening. I hate to throw a monkey wrench into something that I think...
Can you state your name for the record, please?
Oh, my name is Ken McNeil.
Thank you.
And I hate to throw a monkey wrench into... I think you want to approve this, but I think there's some problems. I agree with what Warren says. What is the cost of undergrounding this power line? There have been some pretty severe fires caused by power lines. And if that can be mitigated by undergrounding these power lines, I think it's worth looking at. And I think we should have an answer as a member of the public, what it would cost the individual ratepayers, if that's who's going to pay for it, to underground these power lines. I haven't heard that. Also, have you heard about above power lines being shot at by, I guess, crazy people? But they like to shoot at the insulators and damage the insulators. Sometimes they damage the power lines. That's going to compromise the power lines and possibly cause it to fall down when there's a wind event. Also, overhead lines, it's supposed to be a redundancy, but when you have wind events, more and more, the power companies want to shut down power lines so that they don't have fires. So this power line will be shut down because it's overhead. If you underground it, you wouldn't have that issue. Also, it would be good to know what is the cost of maintaining an overhead power lines, whatever they're proposing, versus having it underground. I think there's a big difference. I think it's substantial. And I think you need to look at some of these costs and to really prioritize what's in the best interest of the public. We don't want fires. And when you have a fire that's caused during a wind event, it's a devastating fire. We don't want that. Thank you.
Lastly, in chambers, we have Micheline Fairbank.
Good evening and thank you. My name is Micheline Fairbank, and I am here representing the JC, JJ, and J Trust. They own 2 impacted parcels under this project in the Cold Springs Valley on the backside of Peavine Mountain. And so I think that there's been a lot of the public comment that previously was made with respect to this particular project, really focused on the Somerset and Verdi area. And unfortunately, I don't believe that our clients necessarily received the adequate public notice to be able to weigh in on some of the concerns. And while we've been following this, based upon some of the publicly available information, there's a couple of things that have raised concerns with respect to my client. And that really is relating to some of the issues that you've seen presented here earlier, and that is this jog that has occurred within the proposed transmission line footprint. Originally, it was proposed, it was more of a linear project, and now we have this recent development that we're unable to ascertain as to how that happened, what transpired. So really, the focus here isn't that this project isn't a good idea. Understanding that, reliable electricity transmission is appropriate and necessary. But there's some concerns with regards to recent developments with regard to this individual project and a specific location. So what we're trying to understand, and these are the questions that we haven't had time to determine, is when was the specific path of this transmission line change selected? Who made that decision? There were these alternative pathways, and as you've seen on many of the presentations that were presented today, on the slides, you see that very linear path in the Cold Springs area. It was shown on both the final EIS decision slide and also, the Alturas corridor slide. But now there is this newly discovered jog that is moving that transmission line out of, as you saw, a less forested area into a more dense forest area and adjacent to residential properties that are occupied. And so that is a concern. Additionally, the question is who made the decision? How was the decision made? Because we've been unable to identify any public records with respect to that. So, these are concerns with regards to this particular project. And certainly it doesn't affect the entire line, but it has very real impacts to residents. And there's a failure to disclose or provide information as to this material change. So for the position that we're at is the questions are, when and who made those change, what considerations were made, particularly moving it into a more forested area in more dense population of the threatened Weber's Avesa, and what public input was provided with that. So I thank you for the time and consideration, and we would just ask that you defer this decision until we get some of those answers.
Thank you.
I do not have any further comment in chambers, but I do have one hand raised on Zoom. Joan Blumenfeld, could you please unmute, state your first and last name for the record? You have 3 minutes.
My name is Joan Blumenfeld. I'm a resident of Verdi. Full disclosure, I live on the California side. I have many neighbors on the Washoe County side. I just heard today that the power lines through Verdi would be no taller than 35 feet, and I wanted to hear a confirmation of that, just because I am in favor of this project. I do feel that we do need more redundancy in our electrical system, but I'm a little concerned about 105-foot power poles right opposite residential development. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have no further hands raised on Zoom.
And we have nobody in here.
No further comment in chambers as well.
I'm going to close down public comment, bring it back to the board for discussion, questions. What do we got? Go ahead.
Mr. Donchik, I do have a question on the JAG change from a straight line? Because on what I'm looking at, I'm not seeing that. Where is that anywhere on the documents that we were provided, unless I'm missing something?
Tim Evans, planner. So I'm looking at the staff report and all the documents that I have as well, and I'm having a hard time finding that same jog.
He's trying. That's what he's saying.
Okay.
For the record, Dave Snellgrove, would be happy to address that. The property that you're talking about is on part of the city of Reno's jurisdictional side, one. And two, I do have members from NV Energy here that can talk about the length of time that that easement's been in place and that jog's been there in agreement with the adjacent property owner. They can cover that. The maps that are largely in here are from the EIS. The EIS was approved 5 years ago when final record of decision came out. The property that is in question where the jog was done is entirely private property. Mr. Sullivan or another member from NV Energy can probably speak to that in addition, but I will point out that property is not in the unincorporated Washoe County jurisdiction, it is in the city of Reno jurisdiction. When I initially turned this in on behalf of NV Energy, I utilized and relied on those initial maps, and those became part of it. This didn't change 3 months ago. I know there's question about that. It didn't. It was something that was done before, and I'm in a learning process. It was partially my error in not getting to where NV Energy actually was in their agreement with the private property owner and getting that shown in some other graphics. The EIS documents are the EIS documents, but again, this is on private property, not on the public land. So that's a big part of the difference. Mr. Sullivan.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Commission members. My name is Mark Sullivan. I work with NV Energy. And just to give you a little background on those easements, like Mr. Snellgrove said, those easements were through a negotiation with a private property owner. They're not a part of the public record, other than there are recorded documents out there that show those easements. Those easements were put in place, negotiated prior to December of 2019. And so those discussions happened prior to that. The documents were actually recorded April 7th of 2020, so they are part of a public record if you were to do a search on that property. And I can just address that, or I can address some of the other concerns that people had if you guys desire that later. Thanks.
Go ahead. Do you have anything else? Go ahead.
So just to get this clearly on the record, the JAG that we're talking about is City of Reno, which we have no purview over on that part of that decision. We're only talking about the Verdi area. Is that correct? Just so I'm clear.
I'm pretty sure that the question, I apologize, I was telling Tim probably the same thing you were just asking about. Were you asking about the 35-foot in her Verdi area? No. Well, I'll cover that, but please restate your question.
I just want to be clear that it's not that our pictures aren't accurate. It's just that we're looking strictly at Washoe County area, and that area that the residents are concerned about is within the City of Reno's purview.
It is within the City of Reno, and those pictures are accurate to what was approved in the EIS. However,
Okay.
this is on private land as well.
Which is not part of an EIS, correct?
Well,
Doesn't require
it is and
EIS.
isn't, but yeah, it changed. It is in the City of Reno. I did want to point out, now we had the one caller call in and wanted clarification to make sure. I heard Tim during his presentation talk about the new poles would be no higher than 35 feet. That is incorrect. We will have poles taller than 35 feet. And part of that is we're going to be double circuiting those poles with the line separation requirements that are required for National Electric Safety Standards. We will have a number of poles that goes down, but the poles, largely they'll be higher. They'll be more than 70 feet. We'll have some that are in the 100 plus or minus feet and in through that Verdi corridor.
Okay,
so I
'cause
don't want
originally-
anyone to misunderstand that.
Because originally you'd said the poles within Verdi were pretty much staying 35.
We're talking about the residential area.
Yeah, and through the residential area, those poles would remain higher. And again, we have some existing poles out there that are 50, 55 feet in height. those are the ones that'll remain in place on the north of us. And that's why, as we get over into where it takes the turn to the north, why those have to be in around the 100 plus foot to get over those poles. So I hope that answers the question. I do want to clarify that if I misstated something or if there was something misunderstood there, I do want you to understand the poles will be taller than 35 feet in there, and they'll probably be more in the order of 70 or higher feet.
Yes. I'm sort of perplexed with the package itself. If this is what was presented by the public to be the accuracy, I mean, the packet is misleading as far as where the power line is going to be, and it sort of taints it.
The information that's in there in those aerial maps, that is from the environmental impact statement. The Peavine-Polville alignment was approved as that line that went straighter. When a private property owner saw that, and Mr. Sullivan talked about that and how that changed around the same time or shortly after the final record of decision came out. Again, I'll point out, as part of this body, that's part that's in the city of Reno. That is also a private property and a negotiated thing between private property owners. The
But
rest
it's
of
in
this,
Washoe County.
that's a good point.
But Reno has the purview over that area, not
Well,
us.
that's the big.
Yeah, I do understand your comment and concern about that. In terms of a private property having some rights to adjust their property, and I understand the neighbor's property owner or neighboring property owner having concerns about that as well. But that was done a while ago. And again, putting those maps in, they were part of the record, and there was probably a little bit more heavier reliance on what the EIS lines were versus where some negotiations and where some things worked out, especially on that one property. It was one property that changed.
Who is the private property owner? It's public record.
Yeah, I think it's under the Hines Ranch. Is that who owns the Stonegate property?
Tom Paddock is a developer.
Yeah, it's the Stonegate property.
It's a what?
Stonegate, it's a development area in the city of Reno that's been in the news quite a bit. I believe it's been known historically as the Hines Ranch. I can't remember what name they're under now.
Okay, thanks.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
For the record, Commissioner Phillips, I have a couple questions. I'm looking at everything that is presented before us, and it seems like Washoe County is being asked to okay a transmission line that is primarily aligned because of a previous agreement that is with a private owner and Reno. How can we make a decision based on that? Does that make sense to you?
I don't know if Tim was going to speak. Now, this will require approval by the city of Reno as well. What you're asked to look at is the transmission line portion that goes through unincorporated Washoe County. I hope that helps.
Will this go to regional?
It will, yes.
Tim Evans, planner. Yeah, so exactly what Trevor just stated is exactly what I was going to state. So yes, it will end up going to regional. And if there's any other questions, I'm happy to answer.
Mr. Chairman, Mark Sullivan, do you mind if I address that question on why you guys would be asked to approve a line that's primarily somewhere else? It's really not primarily somewhere else. It's the line representation of approximately 10.1 miles. 6.8 of that is in Washoe County, the unincorporated area of Washoe County, and 4 of it's actually in the city of Reno. So we will be going in front of the city of Reno, and that city of Reno, that portion of it, obviously it's their jurisdiction, and they'll be reviewing that and whether or not it's an appropriate change or not an appropriate change. But those types of changes that happen outside of the public process are private negotiations because they're private lands. So the Forest Service has no control over private lands. They can't tell people we have property rights, and those people have those rights to develop their land and do what they like with it. And so we are trying to accommodate those individuals who have a development plan, and they wanted to move forward with it. And when they found out about our power line, they said, this is going right through our development. This is going to cost us, all this development. We can't have that. And so we tried to accommodate them the best that we could. And that's where that came from.
Good. Linda, do you have any questions?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Okay. Tim, I've got a question. This is Rob. At the beginning, you said that in Mogul, in the town, that the poles weren't going to be more than 35 feet. Now, all of a sudden, they're changing?
Correct. Tim Evans, planner. So as we've been going back and forth and talking, I've been reading through all the documents and things like that to check and verify what was in my staff report and what was actually in the application itself. So looking at everything, it looks like I misspoke. The actual tower height will be anywhere from up to around 50 feet or somewhere around there within that corridor. So my sincere apologies that was a complete oversight on my part. It is in the staff report correctly. I just completely misspoke.
Are we still losing the 11 poles?
Yes, that's still going. It's just that the tower height themselves within that Verdi corridor there will be greater than the 35 feet.
Okay. And that dog leg, it is approved through the environmental study?
Correct, as far as I know.
And that's City of Reno.
It's not.
Actually, let me jump in, Mark Sullivan. It wasn't part of the environmental study because it's private property. So
Okay.
they only study public property. And so the
Okay.
Forest Service wouldn't have looked at that. It's private.
So that wasn't necessary?
That's not a part of that, no.
Okay.
But we, as a company, we'll avoid anything that we're abiding by in the public Forest Service land, if there's Weber and Facia or any of those endangered species.
Okay.
We put, I think it was $800,000 up, and it's a 3-to-1 ratio that's going to be in for planting in mule deer habitat and those
Sure.
types of things. So
Yeah.
we've made a substantial commitment to making sure that we're not hurting any of the environment like that. If there are
Right.
some of those types of species or any of those elements on the property, then we're going to address those, the
Okay.
same as we would if it was Forest Service property.
Okay, thank you. And Tim, one last question. Was public notice sent out appropriately? Because somebody mentioned that they didn't get public notice.
Tim Evans, planner. So yes, public notice went out multiple times for this project. So it was upon initially receiving this application last year in around September or so, all 860 notices were sent out. And then for this public hearing itself, the 860 notices were sent out again. So
Okay, yeah. Got to take your word for it. Okay. Anybody else have any questions? No. Can I get a motion then?
Commissioner Donchik, I'm working with the amended possible motion that we provided. I move that after giving reasoned consideration to the information contained in the staff report and information received during the public hearing, the Washoe County Planning Commission approved with conditions special use permit case number WSUP 23-0032 for NV Energy for the construction of 6.8 miles of 120 kilovolt transmission line within unincorporated Washoe County with the conditions included as Exhibit A as amended to this matter, having made all 5 findings in accordance with Washoe County Code 110.810.30. I further move to vary the Development Code standard in Table 110.406.05.1 to allow structures up to 105 feet in height, waiving the parking standards of Article 410, waive the landscape standards of Article 412, and the 3-to-1 slope standards of Article 438 of the Washoe County Development Code.
Okay. I just want to make one comment before I ask for a second. We are only approving Washoe County. We have no authority in any other county or city. Can I get a second on this? Okay, I'll second it. That's fine. I'll second it. And all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
So we have four and 1 against. Is that right?
I'm not sure about Linda's
Yeah,
vote.
Linda, what did you
Can you do
say?
a roll call vote, please?
Aye.
You said aye. So you were for or against?
4.
You are for. Okay. So I was correct. So we have 4, How did you vote?
Nay?
You voted yes, you voted for it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, but you know what? Let's do a roll call.
Roll call, just to
Let's do a roll
keep it
call.
legal.
Just to make sure that we've got it all.
We can all hear each other.
Okay, Rob Pierce,
I vote for it.
Pat Phillips,
Yes, yay.
Michael Flick,
No.
Linda Kennedy.
Yes.
That's 4 yes.
And Francine.
Oh, Francine Donchik, excuse me.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to take a 10-minute break.
We can't go, Michael Smith's still out.
Presentation, that's
Well,
hurtful. That is hurtful.
We have to wait. You
We have
got
to
the
wait, and
countdown
Michael's still
timer.
missing.
Oh, we got 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got 2 minutes. I should have said 5 minutes.
Then we all wouldn't have gotten out of here.
Notice these old used water
They've been
bottles
sitting in the
today.
cupboard for like 6 years.
Yeah.
That's what I started to do.
Yeah, good night.
Clean up after myself.
Run, Michael.
Right there, you're wrapping.
Oh, that's a good. See, there you go. Put it in here then. Well, all right, call, well, we got 4 seconds, 3, 2, 1. Call the meeting back to order, it's 8:19. Next item on the agenda is 9C, special use permit case number.
Wait, Commissioner
WSUP.
Pierce, if you could pause 1 second, it's delaying on unmuting Chambers.
I can't see it right here. Gotcha. All right, you're good.
Okay, if you could start over, thank you.
All right, we'll bring the meeting back to order. It's 8:20. The next item on agenda is 9C, special use permit case number WSUP 23-0032. Oh, sorry, that's the wrong one. I apologize. Is 9B, development code amendment case WDCA 24-0003, short-term rentals. Mr. Lloyd, please announce.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This item for hearing, discussion, and possible action to initiate an amendment and approve a resolution to amend Washoe County Code in Article 319, short-term rentals, by modifying various sections in order to clarify maximum occupancy limitations associated with an STR permit, limit STRs to 1 per parcel in the Tahoe planning area, prohibit new STRs in accessory dwellings in the Tahoe planning area, clarify when an STR permit must be relinquished, move requirement for an outdoor fireplace permit from the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District, allow for an updated STR permit renew date via payment of a prorated renewal fee, remove the requirement for a signed notary for an STR renewal application, clarify that a new STR permit is required for each change of parcel ownership, grant a 30-day automatic grace period for renewals with a possible additional 30-day discretionary grace period that may be granted by the Director of Planning and Building, and clarify violation and revocation regulations, and by amending Washoe County Code Chapter 125, Administrative Enforcement Code, to reduce the appeal period for STR stop activity orders from 30 days to 14 days in all matters necessarily connected therewith and pertaining thereto, If the proposed amendments are initiated, the Planning Commission may recommend approval of the proposed ordinance as submitted, recommend approval with modifications based on input and discussion at the public hearing, or recommend denial. Any material modifications that exceed the scope of the amendments being considered at this hearing may require continuation of the hearing for possible action at a future meeting. If approval is recommended, the Planning Commission is asked to authorize the chair to sign a resolution to that effect. So, and representing Washoe County in this matter is, I'm representing Washoe County. I'm Trevor Lloyd. Thank you all. This item is basically it's a continuation of a program that we have had in place now for several years. And with such a large program such as this, there's going to be kinks that need to be worked out. And so what we've been doing over that period is gathering from multiple sources what those kinks are and bringing forward amendments. Really, the purpose is cleanup, but it's also to help streamline the permitting and the enforcement for short-term rentals. With that, we have, just so you're all aware, we've got approximately 700 permits throughout Washoe County. However, the vast majority of them are in the Incline Village, Crystal Bay area. However, there's also a scattering of short-term rentals down here in the meadows. We were given direction by the County Commission to move forward with these. We went through a fairly rigorous community engagement process. We took this out, and I will go through that. We took this to several workshops. In fact, we had 3 in the fall. One was held at the Incline Library, and then 2 were held on Zoom. We had a total of about 70 attendees, and we received 40 comments, and I believe you all have that in your packet as well. So I'm just going to rush through these proposed amendments, as again, most of them are cleanup. I will highlight some of the more impactful of them as I go through these. All right, starting with the first. First of these amendments is to expand Section 319.15A4 to clarify that the maximum the maximum occupancy applies not just for the renters, but for also the property owners. And that includes events, weddings, or other parties that, again, you are not exempt if the property owner wishes to hold such an event. If there is an STR on that property, it would fall under the same rules and regulations, whether it's being rented at the time or not. Also, we are removing the term familial association, as we are told that is very difficult to enforce. I'll keep moving through these. See, Amendment 2, this item expands Article 319.15A5 for non-owner, just to clarify that a non-owner cannot be a permittee, an STR permittee. Only an owner of a property can apply for and obtain an STR permit. All right, Amendment number 3 expands 319.15A6. This really prohibits the use of an accessory dwelling as a short-term rental in the Tahoe planning area. Still allows ADUs to be used as short-term rentals down here in the Truckee Meadows, but anything in the basin. And this really is probably the biggest change that we're proposing. This came with a good deal of support from the residents of the Tahoe Incline Village and Crystal Bay, as we're seeing really a minimum number of workforce housing, and there is a need to increase that. And so the idea was to, as we open up the possibility for accessory dwellings in the Tahoe Basin, to restrict those for residents that live there permanently. All right, Amendment 4 is a new proposed language that would be under 319-15A, a new 15. Similar to Amendment 1 that I already discussed about, every short-term rental property is held to the same standards regardless of rental status. If the property owner wishes to adhere to or wishes not to adhere to these standards, they would be required to relinquish their STR permit. Amendment number 5, this would expand on, this would be an amendment to Section 31920C15. This came directly from the Truckee Meadows Fire Department, where they indicated that they do not permit open pit fires, so there you cannot obtain one. That is only something that they do up in the Tahoe Basin through the North Lake Tahoe Fire Protection District. So again, those uses are still prohibited. Open pit fires are prohibited in the Tahoe Basin. All right. Amendment 6. This expands 31920C17. This was really provided as a caveat. Again, the idea is that STRs would allow for accessibility for emergency vehicles with the understanding that there are certain winter conditions in the Tahoe Basin at times. There is an understanding that they may be temporarily inaccessible. All right, Amendment number 7. This is an expansion of 31925. This expansion would allow for a prorated annual fee. Really the intent, we get a lot of calls from time to time from certain STR permit holders asking if they can change their annual renewal date, because oftentimes when that date comes due, they're either out of town, out of the country, or inaccessible. And so this would allow for a change of that, essentially that permit renewal to take place. All right, Amendment number 8. This is a new language under 31930A, sub 3. This would, well, in this case, in the event that a property is sold or transferred, say it's transferred to, it may be transferred to a family member, Washoe County would require the approval of a new application. So a new STR permit would need to be issued. Again, this is really codifying a current practice that we currently require at this time. All right, Amendment number 9. This is the grace period, allowance for a grace period for renewals. The idea here is to grant an automatic 30-day grace period for renewal applications with an additional possible 30 days at the direction of the director. What we find is that most of the renewals come during a very short part of the year, usually from June till about mid-September. That's when we get the rush of renewals. Based on that, and also to grant a little bit of leeway to some of the permit holders, we want to codify this grace period. We have been granting grace periods in the past, but this would actually codify that current practice. All right, amendment number 10. This would be an expansion of section 31930C. This would allow for, if there is evidence that's provided by one of our partnering agencies, whether it's the Sheriff's Office, the Incline Village General Improvement District, this would allow those agencies to provide support for our code enforcement process, and it could be used as a basis for opening investigations for other code compliance issues. All right, Amendment 11. This is a removal of the requirement for a notary for renewals. Currently, we require all renewal applications to provide us with a signed and a notarized affidavit. They find that rather onerous. We still require a signed notary for new applications. This would just remove that requirement for renewals. All right, Amendment 12. This involves permit revocations. This is amended language to 31940. This new language will expand the grounds for revocation of an STR permit if it's discovered that unauthorized work. Oh, am I reading the right one? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm reading the wrong one. I was reading the next one down. This language would clarify that a 1-year wait time to reapply would only apply to a property owner, not to the property. So it would not punish, say, a new owner of a property. They don't have to wait that 1-year period. Okay, this is the one I was referring to. This is Amendment 13. Again, it's also a permit revocation. This language would expand the grounds for revocation of an STR if it's discovered that unauthorized or unpermitted alterations have occurred to the short-term rental property. And this is finally the last of the proposed amendments. This is a proposed amendment to Chapter 125. That's our administrative enforcement code under Section 125.157, Sub 8. This is the only change we're proposing to this chapter at this time. This change would change the appeal period for stop work activity orders from 30 days down to 14 days to help streamline the code enforcement process. That concludes my presentation. I have the possible motion on the overhead above, and I'm available to answer any of your questions at this time.
Thank you. This time, I'd like to open up public comment. Do we have any public comment?
I have no public comment in chambers. I have no hands raised on Zoom.
Okay, I'll close public comment, bring it back to the board. Do we have any questions, concerns, or can I get a motion?
Quick question. So if a property owner wishes to use their own property to the full extent not granted under the STR minus occupancy permits, they can withdraw their STR permit, and then since it hasn't been rescinded or taken away, once they're done with their party or event or something like that, then they're entitled to apply for a new one without a 1-year wait time?
Yeah, they wouldn't have to wait the 1 year. The 1 year wait time is only if it is revoked due to violations and code compliance matters. So, and it's actually a current practice also. So we are just simply codifying that current practice.
Okay.
No question.
Okay.
I'm happy to make a motion.
Go ahead.
I move that after giving reasoned consideration to the information contained in the staff report and information received during the public hearing, the Washoe County Planning Commission recommend approval of WDCA 24-0003 to amend the Washoe County Code Chapter 110 of the Development Code, Article 319, short-term rentals, and Chapter 125 of the Administrative Enforcement Code as reflected in the proposed ordinance contained in Attachment A1. And I further move to authorize the chair to sign the resolution contained in Exhibit A on behalf of all of the Planning Commission and to direct staff to present a report of this commission's recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners within 60 days of today's date. This recommendation for approval is based on the 4 findings within Washoe County Code Section 110.818.15E.
Okay, do I have a second?
Commissioner Phillips, second the motion?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed say
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Yay.
Okay, that takes us to item number 10, chair and commission items. Does anybody have any future agenda items they want to see? No. Moving
Well,
on.
just a quick one, if it's not too much trouble. It's been a while since we've seen plan not yet built to see where we are sitting in the county with, they're talking about how availability, where we're sitting with how many of these developments have been approved that aren't anywhere or where they're moving. Would that be possible?
Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, it's been a while since we've had a tentative map or something that would
So if we could
trigger that, but
just get
maybe,
an idea.
maybe that would be a good idea. I'd like to provide the Planning Commission with that approved unbuilt map to show, where we are with those.
Because a lot of them that are coming to us now are saying, we need more housing, but we're
Right.
going, well, how much is already approved out there that hasn't been built? So it's just,
Right.
It's a good point.
Right.
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, that'd be good. Great idea. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, moving on, request for information from staff. Do you have any? Oh, I guess that would have been it. Okay, number 11, Director's Legal Counsel items, report of previous Planning Commission items.
I have a few to report on. On April 16th, we had, looks like 3 items that went to the County Commission. The first was the Village Green Code Amendment. The second was the Sutcliffe Master Plan and Reg Zone Amendment and Code Amendment. And the third was the Michaela MPA RZA. The code amendments required a first and second reading, so the second reading for those 2 DCAs I just mentioned will be heard at the BCC at their May 14th meeting. And that's all I have.
Legal, anything from legal?
Nothing from me tonight. Thank you.
Okay, let's open up general public comment. Do we have any general public comment?
No general public comment in chambers. I have no hands raised on Zoom.
All right, it's 8:38. We are adjourned.